Hey guys, Tom Barkley here, just outside Tottenham's training ground. As you can see, I'm here not for Tottenham today, but for England duty, which is because this is often where England train when they are playing at Wembley, pretty much all the time. And today we spoke to Harry Kane. Harry Kane back at Tottenham briefly for England duty. So he is due to win his 100th cap for England tomorrow, Tuesday, against Finland. I thought it might be a fitting time just to speak about him, obviously with his legendary legacy here at Spurs, or if that's how Spurs fans still see him. I'm not sure after he left for Bayern Munich, obviously a couple of years ago, but or over a year ago. But yeah, Kane, interesting to speak to him ahead of this 100th cap, which is one heck of a milestone when you think about it. Only 10 players, he becomes the 10th player to have done it. Peter Shilton is number one on 125 caps. You really do have to fancy Kane to break that, the way he's playing. And first of all, just when you speak to him, because he did a press conference, and afterwards he spoke to the newspapers as well, and he's just obviously such a confident individual now. But he's very He's very respectful. He sort of gives everyone their time that deserve it. He listens to every question that you ask, and considers his response. Often says what you probably expect him to say, but I think he's someone that probably gets underrated for what he's done, which seems madness given the amount of goals he scored. But it is quite an interesting time in Harry Kane's career, I would say. He's obviously had the Euros, where he is now starting to admit he wasn't at his best. He does seem to caveat that when he's talked about it recently, saying that not everyone, a lot of other players weren't at their best either. But do you think, and perhaps the focus on him has been more on him than others. But I don't know. I think Kane's form, the way England played, was a real sort of valid question going into or throughout the Euros, and how he can perhaps, if not adapt, then fit in with the sort of modern way of playing, which is going to be relevant to Bayern Munich with Vincent Kompany. He's already talked about how that Kompany wants to play a way more intense style of play at Bayern, and how he's going to fit into that. He's obviously scored goals already in the Bundesliga, but yeah, an interesting moment for Kane. He spoke about in the open press conference, so I can talk about it now. He talked about Ronaldo and his influence that he's had on him. He doesn't sort of know him personally, been at a few events where he's met him, but just his longevity and his sheer determination to keep going is something that he finds very, very inspiring. 901 goals, obviously, the other day, and Kane thinks he can go on a lot longer himself. But I suppose it sort of remains to be seen whether he had just basically a bit of a blip because of that back injury, which, even though he said he was physically fine, it just felt like he wasn't, or whether there's more to it. It's way too early to be sort of writing him off, but I just feel like it's an interesting point where he's proven people wrong throughout his career. He obviously got released by Arsenal. We're going all the way back to then when he got released by Arsenal as a kid, but it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I'm interested to know what Spurs fans think, really. Do they even care anymore? Surely after time has passed and the sort of pain to a certain extent of him leaving his boyhood club is over, and they can sort of appreciate that. I think it was probably the most palatable exit he could possibly have had. Made the club a lot of money, year left to a club that is pretty inoffensive when it comes to sort of any kind of rivalry. There's hopefully a lot of good faith for him. I mean, I was at the Bayern Munich game at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, the final pre-season friendly ahead of the season. Kane got a pretty good reception. I wouldn't say it was like absolutely rip-roaring, but then look, he's playing for a different team now, so what would you expect? Perhaps you couldn't expect any more than that, but I'd like to think that he would still be viewed in a fantastic light, really, given the service he gave to the club. And when you look at those names on the Centurion list that he's a lot, up with, or will be by the time he plays, Rooney, Shilton, Lampard, Gerrard, a lot of players, Ashley Cole. But I think, to be honest, given his numbers for England and how far he's gone with them, even if at the last Euros some might argue he should have been brought out of the team and it wasn't exactly the success of the team wasn't exactly down to him this time. I think he's done more than any of them really, and I think he should be given the respect that he's due really. So that golden cap that he's going to receive seems obviously well worthy. And just look at some stats he's had. I mean, 66 goals in 99 games. That's phenomenal. So he's only, like I say, he'll be 25 off Peter Shilton. 72 games as captain. It's quite overlooked. How often? I was quite surprised by that. I mean, obviously, it seems like ages ago that we had another England captain, so perhaps it's not that surprising. But I don't know. 72 games is a long time. So fair play to him. Was it 28 games that he's played in major finals, more than any other England player? 83 competitive matches. Now, obviously, there are more games these days, so that is part of it compared to yesteryear. But obviously, it more speaks to the fact that compared to relatively recent times, just England got further than they have done. And fair play completely to him. It'll be interesting to see how he adapts to Lee Carsley's style of play, a bit like Company, probably a bit more intense. I thought he was pretty good against Ireland, but I'd like to see Carsley getting the best out of him again after what we saw at the Euros. So, yeah, interesting to see Kane back at Spurs. And just a sort of final thought about a different player, current Spurs player, because it has been quite noticeable that there have been no Tottenham players in this particular England squad. There are some young players. Obviously, Archie Gray is one that looks like he could be someone if he really does improve at the levels that people are expecting him to. He is someone that should be hopefully one day targeting England duty. But James Maddison's the obvious one right now, and Dominic Solanke, albeit he's injured. And I do think Solanke's got a great chance of getting into this England squad, given the lack of just the sheer amount of players behind Kane at the moment. Obviously, there's Watkins, he'd be next in line. Tony, well, Carsley's kind of kept the door open, even though he's gone to Saudi Arabia. You've got to say that's probably not going to help his cause. And Solanke, if he has a good season with Tottenham, I think he should be right in there. But then on to Maddison. So I worry about James Maddison's England's chances at the moment, because this was a squad, this first squad, with no Bellingham, no Phil Foden, and he didn't make it. I mean, Foden was in it originally, I suppose, and then withdrew, so that could be part of it. But Carsley, as we saw in the Ireland game, wants to play with a number 10. He wants to play with a creator in that position, so much so that he played Jack Grealish, who used to be fantastic in that position, and to be fair, was very, very good in the game, but he hasn't really played there for City for a long, long time, whereas Maddison has. And obviously Morgan Gibbs-White came off the bench, so he comes into it as well. And there are other players too. Eze could play more centrally. Just feels like Maddison's very down the pecking order. Now, Carsley will know what he's like as a player. I think when Maddison was with the 21s a few years ago, I think Carsley would have been an assistant to Eddie Boothroyd at the time, so he'll know him from then, if I'm right, because there was a period where he was assistant, then he went away and then he came back. But I think he'll be well aware of James Maddison's qualities. May even worked with him as a youngster actually at Coventry, which is interesting. But I think personally Maddison's had a pretty good start to the season, given what a poor 2024 he's had so far. It looks like he's a lot fitter. He looks like he's really being helped by the added competition of Lucas Bergvall pushing him. And if it weren't for the fact that they lost at Newcastle, had they actually won that game and that lovely shot that he had gone in, obviously it's a lot ifs, buts and maybes, then I think we could be talking about Maddison, returning to form properly. But it didn't happen, and now there's sort of question marks still over him. And I just feel like England, whilst he almost looked a shoo-in about a year ago to the England squad, and maybe even a big chance of playing in the team, less so now. And so he feels like he's got a lot of work to do. He's obviously a really talented player, so you wouldn't write him off, but I do worry about his chances going forward. So hopefully, like Postecoglou has spoken about in the first press conference, he can use that to his advantage, improve his performance for Tottenham, and really kick on and get back into that squad. Obviously, this is the final England game before return to the Premier League action. We've got North London Derby, so Spurs fans will be lots of stuff talking about that and writing about that ahead of that tournament, about that huge match, which feels like a real big one. But for now, Harry Kane back at Spurs, albeit briefly to train. I think we should appreciate him for the wonderful player he was and is.